Welcome to another episode of River West Flowing. I'm Jorianne, the Coffee Psychic, your host for today, and today's topic is regression therapy. We have two wonderful guests with us today, Dr. Robert Crawford, who has also hosted his own show, yes, Secrets to Success. And Robert, would you be willing to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm, pardon me, Dr. Robert Crawford, and I'm the host of Secrets to Success on Channel 21, Cable Access, and I'm also a clairvoyant and a past life regression therapist, and I have a doctorate in transpersonal psychology.
Great, thank you. And then Reverend Michael Dyer, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Currently a hypnotherapist. I do past life readings on a psychic nature, and I am currently writing a novel.
Great, great. Well, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I'd like to ask you, which one of you would like to kick off our show today with the definition of regression therapy? What is regression?
Well, go ahead.
Okay.
You sure now? Okay. Well, regression therapy is the most popular form of regression therapy is accomplished through hypnosis, and the purpose of regression therapy is to help the client or patient to regress to a former lifetime, mm-hmm, and in the hopes of achieving some sort of cure for his or her problem, because a lot of people in this present life are having problems that are attributable to past lives, and they have reoccurring situations in their life. The regression therapist's job is to regress them to a former lifetime to see where the karmic tie is, where the karmic bond is, what has happened here. And a lot of times you find that in regression, history is trying to repeat itself in the present tense. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. See, so simply put, regression therapy is to help the individual. It's not for people, though, who think they were Abraham Lincoln or Billy the Kid in a former lifetime or Al Capone. This is pop stuff. But it's a serious psychological modality to help people achieve peace of mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If I could add on to that.
Go ahead.
Usually in psychotherapy, the purpose is to get the person to go back to the original traumatic event that has caused the present day symptoms. Mm-hmm. And you know, most psychoanalytic theory is like, well, it has to be in childhood.
Yeah.
But by regressing somebody and simply saying go back to the original time, that kind of leaves it open. And some people have gone back to, well, when I was, you know, a teenager in Oklahoma, it's like they'd never lived in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, what year is it? Mm-hmm. Well, it's 1840.
So a lot of therapists that would actually be doing some regression work on clients thinking, I mean, there are normal, regular, everyday therapists that don't believe in past lives.
Exactly.
Can be thinking, well, this has something to do with the childhood, and then suddenly they'll be regressing them, thinking that it's an earlier childhood episode, mm-hmm, and finding them going back through the pages of time to a different time period, correct?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And, you know, in anything, we want to know who would be... who would this be valuable to, basically, the regression therapy?
Michael?
Who would this be valuable to?
Yeah. Could just anyone walk in with a symptom, with a fear, with a phobia? Could it just be anyone, or?
Well, sure.
Okay.
Anybody?
I mean, do they have to wait till it's at acute stages, or?
Usually a person goes and sees a therapist anyway. Because there are certain symptoms that are problematic that are getting in the way of just naturally living out their lives. And sometimes it reaches an acute stage. I mean, it's just like a pain in the tooth. You know, eventually you see the dentist. Well, these symptoms or these behaviors are getting in the way of having normal relationships with people. And then in the process, they go to a therapist who does hypnosis and regression work. Then they'll go back to the original incident whenever it was.
Yes, I've heard of some cases where people have gone to a regular therapist for quite a long time,
Yeah.
and then they still keep coming up with the phobias and everything, and the only thing that really does help it is by going through a past life regression.
Yes, well, see, in a past life regression, I'm sure Michael will agree with me, when we do hypnosis, when we perform hypnosis on a client, you never know what you're going to find. It's like walking into a dark room, and you know there's a person there, but you really don't know, or you do not know where the person is standing because it's a dark room. There are no lights.
Mm-hmm.
And so in, pardon me, hypnosis and hypnotherapy, when you take a person into a past life, or even if you say, let's go back to the exact moment that you remember having that problem, the person goes back, and surprise, surprise, they're back in the 17th century or something, okay? And you're amazed because unless you have really had experience with past life therapy, a lot of traditional hypnotherapists, and I think Michael will bear me witness to this, they don't know how to handle it. It's like a thing of where they feel the person is hallucinating.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do past life, when you're familiar with past life therapy, it allows you to bring comfort to the client and assure them that they're going through a stage or a phase of what has happened before, and now we're getting to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
The whole situation with past life regression therapy is to get to the solution of the problem. When did it all begin, as
Right.
Michael said? You know, it goes back to the beginning. Everything goes back to the beginning, going back, you see. And this is legitimate therapy.
Well, the thing that I find interesting is that I've seen some people, they're going through life normally, suddenly a phobia appears. They're 25 years old, they're 35, they're 42, and suddenly they're claustrophobic. And I've had a similar experience. Out of nowhere it appeared. And it was actually when I went and I took a guest down to the Museum of Science and Industry into the coal mining experience.
Okay.
And I felt like I was there. And it was like, oh my God, and I had to get out because I couldn't breathe.
Yes.
So I had a situation with that myself personally. So people, I think when you have a similar situation that you're surrounded with, it'll trigger the old past life experience.
And you know, that's funny that you should mention that point, trigger. That's the key word here. We as hypnotherapists, we as regression therapists, we have to trigger something in the individual that takes them to that point. Because once you do that, you see, you first of all explain to the client that this is not a psychic consultation. You will be giving me answers. I won't, be giving, because this is your regression.
Right.
And the purpose of the regression is to release the person. I had a client one time that she became a client through her brother, who is a regular client. And he brought her to me because all of a sudden, out of all the years they'd known her, she began to suddenly just get really weird. She began to stay in the house. She had an apartment overlooking the lake, beautiful scenery. And she seemed to be perfectly normal, perfectly happy. And what happened was they brought her in to me. And so I said, I really do not feel that we should do a consultation with her. I feel that we should do a regression therapy. Have you ever heard of regression? They said, yes. So we talked to her. She wore these big dark glasses. And what had happened, the symptoms were this. She refused to leave the house. She would do everything by phone, order food by the phone. Everything was done by phone, pay bills, everything. She, all of a sudden, she wouldn't leave the house. She was a girl at that time. She was 27 years old. I did a regression on her, and I found out something very scary. In a past life, she had been molested by her father. In this life, the current lifetime, the molestation was still going on, plus he was molesting the grandchildren.
Wow.
And the Department of Children and Family Services heard the tape that I made, and based on the tape, and this is no lie, they removed the children immediately. I mean, no questions asked.
Wonderful.
Removed them.
Wonderful.
Because it was a toxic environment.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of good things that can come
It's
out
a
of
lot
here.
of good things. So, you know, it's a lot of good things that can come out of regression therapy.
Yeah. And what actually happened to this woman then, once the therapy was
What
done? Was there
happened-
any change in her
What
behavior?
happened with her was she remembered everything, and everything in her past life was similar to things in this life. It was still the father image, but in a past life she was a boy, and he molested her. In this life she was really a girl, and he molested her.
Now, what I've heard about regressions is also that if we have a problem in one lifetime, we do not get it resolved in this lifetime, we will have a pattern.
It'll follow you.
Yes.
That's what karma
And
is.
it can be, yeah,
Karmic.
right.
Yeah.
And all right, the issue of karma. And you will have this repeatedly until you get it resolved. So that situation in which you're speaking of right now, Robert, seems to be, that was like the turning point for this woman.
It was a big turning point for her because it took months before we could get her back to normal. But now I'm happy to report that she lives in another state and she has a career going, and she's
excellent.
doing great.
Wonderful.
She's doing great.
Wonderful.
But she comes back here periodically to visit, but of course it goes without saying that she never looks up her father,
Of course.
you know.
But now this isn't something that we should assume is going to be like a one-time quick fix.
No.
Should we
Not
say that
always.
this might take a couple of sessions or something for somebody to resolve these deep buried issues? Could we say that?
If it is a serious issue like the one that I just spoke about, it can take 2 to 3 sessions.
Or more possibly, right?
Good regression therapy, if the therapist is good, and if the client, it also depends on the client, because in a therapeutic regression therapy, you cannot guarantee, you have no right to guarantee the client that one session, I guarantee you will be okay. You can't say that. You do
Right.
not know what trauma the individual is going through. You do not know how much pain this individual has suffered. So you have to first gain the client's trust.
Right.
And the way to do that is, like Michael and I were talking before the program, we both are familiar with Ericksonian hypnosis.
Yes.
And I strongly suggest that anyone out there that, you know, is attempting to be a hypnotherapist, you should study Ericksonian.
Milton Erickson. Yes.
Great
Wonderful.
man. Great.
Great man.
Because
yes.
you see, clients can sometimes become resistant, even though they might walk in and say, you know, Reverend Michael, I want to be released of this, and Michael says, okay, good, you know, and he starts in thinking that he's going to get cooperation, and the person looks at it and freezes. I mean, just freezes. And so you have to know how to get past that, and I think there was no one better to teach us that than Milton Erickson.
Yes. Yes, and he was a wonderful man.
He was a wonderful
And if I'm
man.
not mistaken, he was ill for quite a while.
He had polio. He was in a wheelchair.
He was in a wheelchair.
He couldn't even wear a false plate because something with his gums. Do you remember? I don't know.
No, I don't remember.
But anyway, he had something wrong with his gums, and he couldn't even wear false teeth. But
And yet he continued his work.
he continued
He
his
was,
work.
he was in such a difficult state. I think it was in a farm in Wisconsin. And while he was slowly healing over the years, he simply studied and observed human beings. Just watched them.
Yeah.
And looked for all the little tiny subtle cues and all the little kinds of unconscious habits that people had, and put all that knowledge together and used all that stuff later on to access their little individual behaviors to induce hypnosis, because you just can't do an automatic hypnotic induction with people.
Thank you.
It's best for them to access their own triggers, their own various resources that they have that allows them to comfortably go into their own hypnotic state,
Yeah.
where they feel comfortable with themselves and then comfortable with revealing what is going on. And the beautiful part about Ericksonian hypnotherapy is that it's a very permissive thing. I don't hypnotize you. I don't tell you what to do. I don't give you the suggestions and say, you're going to do this.
Right.
It's rather, what is it that you feel you need? How fast do you want to go? And then I simply guide. I guide a person through their own therapy. They basically heal themselves.
Exactly. All hypnosis
That's-
is self-hypnosis.
That's
All
right.
hypnosis is
self-hypnosis.
self-hypnosis.
That's the beauty of it.
Yes, and a lot of people are so afraid of this because they think someone else has control over me.
They watch
I
the
don't,
TV.
I don't know if they're going to
And
make me
stage
become a
hypnotists.
chicken
Thing with, Bela
and do
Lugosi
weird
said,
things on the stage
yeah.
and stuff.
The worst thing is to watch a Bela Lugosi movie and he tells you at 12 o'clock midnight you will come to me.
Right.
You know, and people say, "Are you going to do that, Michael?" Are you gonna? And they freak out. You know, they
That's
freak
right.
out. That's not going to happen, folks.
Yes.
It's not real.
That's
you
right.
know, hypnotherapy is nothing but a relaxed condition, a state of consciousness that allows you to relax
Totally.
and allows us to access the problem, get to the root of the problem, and help you heal yourself. Because, as Michael said,
As well as to be very open.
it's supposed to be open,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
all this
Open to
mystery stuff.
You,
know?
you are open to suggestion.
Yeah.
But then the responsibility is thrown back onto the hypnotherapist as to how do you verbalize the suggestion. I
Totally.
don't tell you what to do.
Right.
I offer suggestions if you're open to receiving them.
Right, right. Well, one thing I'd like to ask you, Michael, is I want to ask you, what was one of your favorite cases that you've heard about, that you studied?
Favorite cases.
Anything unusual?
Oh, yes, there's some very unusual things. One has been dealing with somebody who was multiple personality and finding out that not all of the personalities were fragments of themselves.
Okay, can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, I'm interested. Elaborate, please.
And another similar case, not dealing with somebody who is multiple personality, but sometimes you talk with the person under hypnosis and somebody or something else speaks back to you.
Yeah.
And what you find out is that it is not the person. There is another discarnate entity of some sort that is speaking. Now this gets us off into a totally different branch of hypnotherapy.
Regression, yes.
But
And yet it's accessed through regressing the person into an altered state of
Right.
awareness, correct? Okay.
right, and you'll get the voice of a human being who is now deceased, departed, dead, and has not gone on to another realm, shall we say, and has hung around on the earth. We call them earthbound.
Yeah.
And often we call them earthbound attachments because they will attach to a particular human being, their aura. And usually it's not, sometimes it's just somebody else, simply because this person is fearful about something and this dead person has the same kind of fear, and so there's a like-mindedness or a like spiritual thing they attach. But often it's a relative
Yeah. It's
of
like,
the person.
and it's like the person, I'm sure both of you saw the movie Ghost.
Yes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in the movie Ghost, Patrick Swayze he doesn't know how to go through the train like the other spirits do because he's a new spirit. And he makes the mistake of getting on this one car, and here's this nut standing up and he says, "What are you doing on my train? Get off of my train!" And he becomes violent. Well, those of us that know that he was an earthbound spirit. He did not want to leave that train, if you notice. He didn't want to ascend higher. And so once your mission is complete here, the spirit ascends, because I think the mistake that everybody makes, a lot of people make this, especially our so-called Christian folk. They say, well, you know, Annie's gone to a better place. She's gone to heaven. Annie has not gone to heaven, because if you read your Bible, the Bible tells you that in the last days we shall be judged. When Jesus comes back, those of us that believe in Christianity, that you will be judged. And then you will go to your final place, which is either heaven or hell,
wherever.
you know, wherever. But I think the people make the wrong assumption, and there are levels and degrees of heaven, because in the 14th chapter of St. John it says, "In my Father's, let not your heart be troubled." I'm sorry. And ye that believe in me, believe also. Ye that believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, which means, interpreted, does not mean the mansion in Beverly Hills, California, or in Winnetka. It means abiding places, abodes. So he says, in my Father's house are many mansions. In other words, that's a place for all of us. You see, but what level are you on? In another portion of Scripture, Paul says, I ascended to the third heaven, but he didn't say ascended to the seventh. Because I have a feeling if he went to the seventh, he would not have come back to talk to us scripturally or any other way, because the seventh heaven is where God resides.
Right.
And there are 7 planes, 7 levels of consciousness. And these are the heavens. I think the worst thing that a minister can teach, and no offense to you because I'm a minister also, but I would never tell a person, when you go to heaven, heaven's not up there. Hell's not down here. There's nothing below the ground except toxic chemicals.
Right, right.
But, you know, now if you want to go down here looking for hell, be my guest, folks. But I won't join you. So, you know, the thing is that heaven and hell are states of consciousness. It's where we put ourselves, you see. And we're saying, I'm waiting for God to deliver me from this hell. You put yourself in hell.
That's a good way of putting it. That is, we put ourselves there.
We put ourselves there.
And that's why some of these earthbounds, you know, the space is open to them to ascend and move on, but
they don't want to.
But because of their feelings of depression, or they want revenge, or whatever they want, they stay on the earth plane.
Right.
And they're here
getting
to
trapped, getting caught. Yeah.
And they're more comfortable on that plane. You see, I think it boils down to a thing, as Michael was saying, they stay on that plane. They want to stay there.
Right.
They could move
they
on.
Place themselves. Yeah, they could
place
move on.
themselves there. They could move, but they don't want to move on.
Well, now one thing that I found, because I've also done the depossession work, and that's with Michael, and I go into the trance, and I do that work. And when I have found some earthbound entities, many of them are truly in a state of confusion, or they are aware that they want to stay with their loved ones. They truly feel that they can still protect their loved ones while staying here on the other side. And that's what I've seen. So they either knowingly or unknowingly are there. And it seems to me that when we go in there to get help for them, they're willing to go.
Oh, okay.
It's like,
because I was curious, because I was going to ask you, and Michael, do you find that some of these spirits are unwilling to go? Because I've noticed sometimes there's a lot of resistance.
There has been. Yes, there has been. I had one uncle that his stubborn attitude, and I repeated this to the woman when I was in trance, and she goes, that's definitely Uncle Bill. And I'm like, okay, well, he's not going anywhere as far as he's concerned. So you really have to call in the big boys to help
in the heavy artillery.
That's right. To help him say, listen, this is a really small hotel room that you're staying in, okay, and there's a bigger place up there.
Hello. There's more room, Uncle Bill.
That's right. That's right. All right, so we've identified then that regression work really can hit a number of different things, and we're going through the past lives, we're going through the attachments, so we're really not just working with those that are incarnate, those of us that are still alive in our physical bodies, but that we can also help those that are that have crossed over, that have actually gotten stuck.
There's you were asking me earlier about an interesting case. I had one in which the person didn't come to me because of some traumatic thing, although I suppose that's what most hypnotherapists get. He was just kind of interested and curious, and what we discovered was, because he had some things, he always wondered why these things are the way they are. With regards to his life, he absolutely loves exotic animals, and I didn't know this until after we'd done the work. And we went back and found out through a series of lives that one of the most important, previous to this one, he had been involved in a number of lifetimes in the jungle and with American Indians, and had learned a lot of animal ways and to do their version of animal magic, shamanism. By the time he got to the Roman period, you hear a lot about lions, peacocks, and other kinds of things that they brought to Rome. I was like, who went and got these? Well, he was one of the guys who was assigned to go out to Africa or wherever he could find exotic animals and bring them back to Rome. I mean, somebody had to do it, and he was one of the guys. He loved it. He loved bringing these animals back to Rome to exhibit in the arenas or whatever they had. And then he got extremely angry and frustrated over the fact that they were using his lions, as he felt. They were using his lions
Yeah.
to throw in there against the Christians. And after when that happened, he said, "That's it," and he walked away from the whole thing. Well, then, as the years went on, he was he had a lifetime in medieval Europe when the bubonic plague hit. And of course, at the time, they thought the rats were doing it. Now we know that it was the fleas that the rats carried. But at the time, he saw people being bitten by rats, and that horrified him. Another lifetime, he was, I think in the 1800s, he was involved with doing some of the early experimentation in biology, chemistry, dealing with molds and bacteria, and seeing, could these be the cause of any of this? Of course it was.
But isn't that the way that some of the stuff goes, is that it's either real or imagined? Like you had just pointed out, it wasn't really the rats, but he may have had a phobia of the rats. So he imagined that it was the rats, and when in all actuality it was the fleas.
Yeah, and of course they didn't know that at the time, but it was just that he was so attuned to animals, he couldn't believe that people were dying and seeing these, hundreds and thousands of rats running all over and biting people and killing them. So he attributed it to the rats. And now in this life, he's still very attuned to animals, keeps exotic animals, and ever since childhood in this life, he's always had one plaguing question: what's that business about the Christians and the lions? And now he knows.
And now he knows.
Now he knows. So it's not just clearing up trauma sometimes. Sometimes regression work is done just to clear up curious things that we have. We wonder, why does this thing plague me? Why does this haunt me? This one burning question or thoughts in my head.
And couldn't it even be, like say, I remember reading a study where this one woman had a phobia of snakes.
Yeah.
Okay? And it turns out that she had been put into a pit of snakes and died that way. But I would want to say it's the possibility that also somebody else that had been watching someone else die of snakes could also carry that fear with them.
That is a possibility.
Yeah.
That is a possibility. I had an experience one time. I call it my embarrassing past life regression. This lady had been a client of mine for clairvoyance consultation for years in Milwaukee. And she always had this fascination about French, and so I looked at her one day, and she did sort of have a French look to her. She had dark hair and, sort of erotic features. And I said, well, you could
What's your
probably
name?
come,
No.
And so she said, you know what? I have always wanted to do a regression, and they tell me that you do that. I said, yes. And she said, well, would you do one for me? I said, sure. So she came in, she got a clairvoyant consultation. She says, I want to do the past life regression today. I said, today? Like, you mean? She says, right after we do the I said, oh, that's work. Now you're going to work me. So I said, well, I don't know. It might not. I was trying to get her even on the next day. She wouldn't do it. So anyway, we go into the regression. And we're doing fine. And I said, where do you see yourself? She says, I'm in this beautiful French village. And she described the rooms and everything. I said, oh, this is good. This is good. And we're getting it all on tape. And all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, she turns to me with her eyes still closed, and she sings to me, Gigi, ja da 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 da. I'm like, what in the world is she doing? And she's singing in a man's voice.
Wow.
And she starts talking in French. And the only thing she would say, do you understand what I am saying to you, monsieur? I said, not really. Could we try English? I don't know French. And she keeps going in this French tone, this French voice. And it's the voice of a man. Then it alternates back to a woman. And I'm sitting here like, uh-oh, you're not going to do so good on this one. And so...
Now, what did you think at that point? Were you thinking attachment, or were you thinking that she had regressed to a man in a different life?
I felt that she had regressed to a man in a different life. And guess what? I asked everybody. I asked a man that came to me. He was a professor. He taught French. And he says, you have to take this to someone else. This is an ancient version of French. I said, an ancient version. He said,
wow.
How did she learn that? I said, I don't know. And so now I'm really upset because I can't tell her anything because we're both listening to tape. She says, I don't even speak French, Robert.
No, so she was speaking French?
She was speaking French.
The actual
and I
words.
took it and they interpreted what she was saying. And when it got to the part about Gigi, and she was giving me a message in French, a psychic message, and he kept looking at me and said, I said, what's funny? He said, I'll tell you. He said, she says you fancy yourself a lover, but if you don't watch out, you're going to get your neck cut off. I said, okay, okay. So that was my most embarrassing experience with past life regression. But she's still a client of mine.
Yeah, but that brings up an interesting point. Dr. Ian Stevenson, who had done a lot of, a tremendous amount of work.
And research.
And research into reincarnation. I know one of the people that he ran into could speak Egyptian at the couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah.
And nobody knows what it sounds like or what it was like, but I think it's called Demotic.
Okay.
And spoke that, and it's like, whatever they say, I guess so. Another man spoke medieval Norwegian.
Wonderful.
And they had to go to an expert to find out what that was. Now that is called xenoglossy.
Okay.
Xenoglossy?
Xenoglossy.
When somebody in trance can speak a different language?
Right, and it raises the question.
Okay, xenoglossy. Okay.
Yeah, how, what is that? How does a person know that? Is it in a past life when they are so thoroughly into the past life experience that they can actually speak the language of that experience in that country? Or is it what some people have said, like with Bridie Murphy or some of the other cases, well, when so-and-so was a little girl or a little boy, they heard their grandmother speak the native tongue that they were born in, and now they don't remember it anymore, and now under hypnosis it comes up.
I think clearly, I can't see how they would be the same. It can't be the same.
Especially if it's medieval Norwegian.
Yes.
Yeah, see.
Ancient language from a different time. Yeah.
And she couldn't have known. Just like my client didn't even speak modern-day French. How in the world could she have known this ancient form of French dialect? And everybody was amazed.
Okay, now this is going to be a strange question, but what is the difference here between this and speaking in tongues?
Well, okay.
Fire away.
Oh, that was not very nice.
Yes.
Okay, let me say this. This is gonna upset a lot of people, but the people in the book of Acts were speaking in tongues, but please, and I implore people out there that are listening that think that they're speaking in tongues, they were speaking in, for instance, let's say he is from the country of Greece, and he's speaking in an ancient Jewish language. I am from the country of I am from the city of Jerusalem, but I am speaking Egyptian. And there are Egyptians there, and it says that each man heard his own tongue. That is speaking in tongues. That's what speaking in tongues really is when, speaking in tongues is what happened here with Michael's client who spoke the ancient Norwegian, my client that spoke a form of ancient French. That is speaking in tongues. But what speaking in tongues is not is when you see people in the so-called sanctified churches that are going off in a trance, and they are in a trance, but they're speaking some, you don't know what it is.
Gibberish or
it's
whatever.
It's gibberish, and it's what is that?
Yes.
That is not the tongue that they're talking about in the book of Acts.
It's also coupled with a lot of emotional release.
Exactly. And I'm sorry. I cannot go along with the sham of that I spoke in tongues last night. No, you didn't. You were emotionally charged by the Spirit, but you did not speak in Greek. If there had been a person from France that did not hear their own tongue, but you see, the apostles when they said the tongue of fire descended upon them and the Holy Ghost filled the place, and they each began to speak in different tongues, and each man heard his own language spoken by another. That was strange because they knew that these people did not know that language. Just like I began to realize that this lady did not know French at all.
Right.
And so that was speaking, she was speaking in tongues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking in tongues is called glossolalia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one is xenoglossy, so
Yeah.
I mean it has the same root word.
Has the same root
but
word.
they're two different phenomena.
Right.
Okay. So the xenoglossia is when people start speaking in a different language
Right.
that they were raised with while they were alive, this lifetime, right? Something that they should not have been able to, they didn't know. They weren't trained in that language.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one is the speaking in tongues, and what's the difference that you see between those two again?
As Robert said, there's a lot of emotional release. There's a lot of speaking in some kind of a way that could be gibberish. It could be nonsense syllables made up by the unconscious. Once in a while, it might be a language.
It might be.
I heard one.
What?
Mahagana, mahagana.
Okay, now you don't hardly get that no more. I mean, hidia, hadia, hiya, but mahaga, maha, now that's a good one. I like that.
That's a personal
I
joke.
like that.
That's something
I'll
that
have
Michael
a drink to
has.
that.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
a little private one that I made up.
So he speaks in tongues on occasion?
Yes.
Yes.
You know,
Called Michael Nonsense.
Yes.
yeah. And truly, you know, this is a phenomenon.
Yes.
In fact, everything we're talking about here, the three of us, it's a phenomenon. It's phenomena. It's not psychic phenomena. And I think a lot of people are trying to confuse past life regression with psychic. It's not psychic. It's not psychic. Do not mistake it for psychic or spiritual or clairvoyant by whatever name you call it. It is a psychological modality. It's a psychological tool.
Yes.
But it embroiders the spirit, but in a different sense.
To me, it's looking back through your history pages from the time of which you originated.
It is the book of life.
Yes.
It is the book of life that the book of Revelation talks about, because you see, everybody thinks that, you know, it's amazing how you can perpetrate a hoax on a congregation or a mass public. Adolf Hitler did it, Napoleon did it, and he got the people all stirred up thinking that they were going to be world conquerors, and they were, but they met that Waterloo. So the hoax here is that you can actually believe in something that is not, as if it were.
Right.
And so the minister tells you, you know, it's like this minister that shall remain nameless, he needs to remain nameless, told these people in a West Side congregation, the end of the world is going to be tomorrow. I want everybody to bring every penny they have in this church. And they did it.
He should be nameless.
And they did it. He should be under the jail. Well, as you know, not only was it the next day and the world didn't end, this is 1999 and the world is still here. I would love to know, what did they do with that man? They should have defrocked him.
Yes.
And you see, there's basically a big lie, and the ministers, the Orthodox ministers, do not want to talk about the word reincarnation. That is a dirty, blasphemous word to minister, because it takes you into a realm that can help you help yourself.
Yes. Yes.
You see, and if you're not careful, you begin to worship the minister as an earthly god, and that's not supposed to be.
Well, this brings up a question for me too, regarding regression. Do both of you believe? I know how I believe, but do both of you believe that this has to be done by a guide, or can people also do self-regression, self-hypnosis? Because there's a lot of books that give you different theories and how to. What's going to be the most effective for somebody? The self-hypnosis, the regression work that they can do, because they can retrieve past lives by themselves, through even with tapes, things like this. Or do you think it's better that they should have somebody that can guide them through?
I would say it's better to have somebody to guide them through.
And I would agree.
And tell me why, please.
You have to know what you're doing, and if you do, you can do the self-hypnosis.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that the unconscious is very open and is very willing to satisfy personal needs or the questions of the therapist, and to do whatever. Now, for instance, even as we were talking earlier with xenoglossy and glossolalia, in a situation like that, if a person believes, oh, I can speak in tongues and I can do these different things, the unconscious will find a way to make it happen.
Exactly.
Whether it's a real phenomenon or not.
Exactly.
That brings up the question of memory versus false memory versus things that the unconscious is willing to make up. So if I say, well, let's take you into a past life, you believe that you had a past life.
Yes.
And I can take you back, and you'll make stuff up. And the therapist is liable to say, oh, that's very interesting. Whereas the client might have made it up, or he might have actually been experiencing a past life. So as we're really treading very delicate waters.
Yeah.
So by going to an experienced hypnotherapist, especially as we were talking, they're trained in Ericksonian hypnotherapy, and in the training, you learn a lot about how to word things so that you're not guiding the person in the way that you think they ought to go. You're not, well, I don't know how to put this. You want the person to lead themselves down their own path of therapy. So you want to ask questions that are objective, and you want to guide them. And if a past life situation comes up, then you go through that. Now, you could lead somebody into saying, "Can you tell me what you're visualizing, what you're seeing?" And I had one person who said they were, at a river, and they stepped over the river. It's like, oh, you can step over a river? Yeah, there's this huge green giant. I mean, it must have been 50 feet tall. And so you go ahead with the story, and the outcome of the story is that the person is healed. You realize that, oh, the great big green giant really is their own personal representation of a parent.
There you go.
And they're finally confronting that, and they're dealing with it. And so in the story, the person is healed.
And it actually could have been their perception of the incident at the time being that huge.
Sure.
That they're reporting.
But it's not a past life. So now another person comes along, and you take them into something, and they begin describing something, and everybody in the story sounds like a real person. It sounds like real scenery. It sounds like a real time period. So how do you know if it's a past life or if it's another made-up story? In the long run, in some sense, it doesn't matter. If the client experiences some therapeutic breakthrough, and their phobia or their situation is healed, then that was the original goal.
Right.
So that's what we're shooting for. But on the side, it might be the case that it was a past life, and then you'd have to do other research to find out if we can tie it to an actual historical incident.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I see too that's real important to have a guide there, a hypnotherapist, is that what if you encounter something that was so traumatic? Because many times through hypnotherapy, they can put you through the death experience, which many times we go to anyway from holding issues of how we crossed over. And if you're trying to do this yourself, and you're going through a horrible traumatic experience, sometimes I feel people get caught up in that.
Yeah, they can. And see, the danger is if the person, let's say that the person has lost a mother, and they want you to regress them back to a memory of something pleasant that happened with the mother. Well, that's okay, but then it can become an obsession. I'm very much against obsessive behavior because it can lead to a lot of damage for the client. If a person contacts their mother, their mother's spirit, and this helps them to release some type of guilt, then you have accomplished something. But it's not good to keep coming back and saying, I want to talk to Mom today. See, that means you are not letting go of your mother, which is physically dead. The spirit lives forever, but the body is dead, and you should let this go.
Well, that exactly goes back to when you have mom or grandma that are on their deathbed, right?
Yes.
And you see that these people really want to leave.
Yes.
But the children are surrounding that bed. Please don't go. Please don't go. Please. And that poor spirit that's trying to make their exit is sitting there feeling guilty, so they're not going to stay. Well, what happens when this lady finally crosses over? Guess what? This is where we get some of our earthbounds.
That's right.
And they are not leaving because the kids, as you were just saying, Robert, they keep wanting to make contact with them, which is wonderful because... But what about the job that they have to do now on the other side?
Exactly.
There are plans. There are things that they're supposed to be doing.
Which is more important.
And they can come back and visit.
Yes.
But to hold somebody hostage, I don't think people quite get that because...
That's not right.
And it takes time to grieve.
And that's part of the work and the responsibility of a very good minister at the time of the funeral. To speak to those people and say, okay, it is time for us to release Grandma and let her go on to wherever she needs to be, and the rest of us need to learn the lessons from Grandma and incorporate them into our lives as we, live our lives here on the earth.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's that strong emotional attachment that's going to keep Grandma earthbound.
Yeah. And they say life is for the living.
Life is for the living, and it brings to mind a funeral that I performed many years ago. One of the funerals, which was the second funeral I performed for this person, her mother died first.
Oh, I was going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah, she didn't die. She didn't die.
I was going to say, wait a minute, Robert.
And she hated both her mother and her father.
Oh, no. Oh, dear.
At the death, she's trying to go down into the grave.
Oh.
And so I stand back, and I have the Bible in hand, and the person assisting me, he says, "Aren't you going to grab her?" I said, "No, let the same spirit that's taking her down bring her back up." She didn't love her anyway. What am I supposed to do? So after the funeral is over, she says, "I want to make contact." I says, "With what?" She says, my mother, "I want to make contact." I says, "No, you don't." She says, "Yes, I do." I said, "No, you don't." She says, "I insist." I said, "All right." She said, "Because I believe beneath it all we had a loving relationship." And I just fall out laughing, because I know from witnessing these acts that you cursed your mother out in front of me. And her mother could talk, just like we're talking now. Her mother would invoke the code of silence, omerta in Italian, which means if you tell, you're dead, She invoked the form of silence. So she would talk when she wanted to talk.
Yes.
And so what happened was I took her back, and she says, "I want to go back to when I was born. Take me back to 6 years old." I said, "Okay." But instead, a weird thing happened. When I got to 6 years old, she went back, but she went back to a former lifetime. And it seems as though in a former lifetime she was her mother's sister, and she beat her quite a bit. She abused her. So in this lifetime, the mom comes back and says, "Okay, kid, it's your turn," right?
Yeah.
So she's waiting for this loving mother to come forward, and she says, I said, "What's she doing?" "She's just standing there and she's looking mean at me. Do something, do something." I said, "I'm going to bring you out." And I brought her out, and she had tears. She said, "Why?" I said, "Because you and I both know that you hated her.
Yeah.
And now you have only your father to hate."
Yeah.
And so when he died, I performed that funeral too. And by this time, I'm thinking, this is not good. And she does the same identical thing. "Oh, Dad, Dad." And she tries to go down in the grave. And so this time I tap her on the shoulder and I said, "You did that act once. Cut it." And immediately she straightens up and she says, "Food is at the house." And it was just amazing, The tears just disappeared. We did a regression.
I was just going to ask,
And we did a regression with the father.
Yeah.
The father came back and told her in no uncertain terms, in today's vernacular, "Get a life. You don't have the house. Your brother has the house." Well, right away she goes back to hating Dad again. "I did love him, but he left everything to my no good brother." I says, "But you didn't love him." "Yes, I did. In death," I says, "No, you didn't."
That's why the regressions, to me, seem to be very significant.
They're very
because
significant.
If you, you want to go back and you want to find out why you hate your boss.
Yes.
Why you have a terrible relationship with your mother or your father or whoever. And if you can find that out, hopefully before they've crossed over, perhaps you can reconcile that relationship, because I've seen things change.
They can change, but you see, unfortunately for her, she didn't find out until after death why she hated her father. She hated him because, like her mother, she could not manipulate them. And she loved to manipulate and control people. She was a control freak.
Yeah, yeah. And that would have even been more interesting to find out in a further past life why she had to have that kind of control this lifetime.
Well, I wanted to, but at that point, she just froze.
Yeah.
She froze. Because she didn't want... See, some people do not want to face their own faults.
Right.
And she didn't want to face her faults. So...
Yeah.
That's part of the thing we were talking about earlier when karma was brought up. Karma isn't just behavioral patterns that you start in one lifetime and then now you bring them into this lifetime, you keep them going. It's also patterns that I have established with this person and that person, and so it's not just patterns in general. I have to actually heal the relationship I have with this particular person and that particular person.
So you can move on.
Yes.
And in the older theories, especially out of the East, that we have to work off our karma, and you can see the parallel with that with Catholic feeling, and this gets into a whole other branch I don't want to get into, but there's a lot of working off of sin, working off of karma, and it doesn't have to be that way. forgiveness is the thing that cuts through all of that.
Yeah, I never could get used to the fact that growing up in New York City, my mother would make me go to church every Saturday, and I would think, for what? And said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 1 week since my last confession. I confess that I did not do my homework. I confess that I hid my comic books under the seat of the couch because I wanted to read my comic books instead of do homework." And the Father would say, "Bless you, son. Do 3 Our Fathers, 4 Hail Marys." Like, 4 Hail Marys?
At least we got those prayers down pat, okay?
Oh, I can do the prayer. I can do the prayer. I can still remember the altar boy prayer, the whole bit. But do I want to do it? No.
Yes, yes. You know what? This brings me to a whole different little section of regression. I had gone through a regression. This was last year sometime. And through this regression, and I'm in an altered state, my arm was suddenly starting to burn. And I was like, oh my God.
Like it was on fire?
Like it was totally on fire.
Okay.
Now, I at this time am 46, and I know I don't look like it. However, I am 40.
No, you don't. And I'm slightly older.
There you go.
We won't even mention it.
There you go. Well, anyway, at this point, I'm sitting here in trance saying, oh my God, my arm's on fire. Now, so this good therapist takes me back. He says, well, go back to the origin of that problem. When was it? This lifetime. I was 16 or 17 years old. Okay. I had a pressure cooker explode in my face.
Oh.
At that time, I raised my arms up like this, and I had all this skin that came off of here. But this was raw meat. This was all the skins that come off here, all the layers. Body memory. He worked with this. Pain went away. But from that explosion, I had that memory trapped in the cellular part of my body, right here. So not only do we have the, we can have attachments, we have regression going to the past lives helping people. What about if somebody's been in a traumatic experience? What if they're having pains in their body? What can we do with that with regression? What if this had been staying with me all this time, which it hadn't been, it just came up in trance?
Well, I would say that a lot could be done with that because first of all, if it were me working, I would seek to bring the pain out. All right, and in order to do that, I would have to regress you to the time that this happened. And at the time it happened, I would say to you, not demand, because as Michael said, it's a series of suggestions. We do not command you to do anything. And I would say to you to release the pain, because you see, the pain in that arm is no longer physical. It is a mental, spiritual feeling, and so we get to the root cause of that, which is that it is trapped. The memory of it is trapped in this arm. And so we do what we call, you can do what you call, I know you're familiar with this, parch therapy. Where I say to you, how does your arm feel? What do you associate the pain with? You might not associate it with the explosion. You might associate it with mother telling you, don't do that again. You see, and this is called parch therapy. And then we remove that and we say, what do you want to say to that arm? What do you want to say to that pain?
Exactly.
How do you want to handle this? And you tell, and we help you with that. See, that's what we're here for. We're facilitators.
Part of that original trauma involves, you know, what decisions did you make on the basis of that? What considerations?
At the time of that trauma,
what feelings? You know, what are all those things that you have developed? And it's like when you go on in life, this particular part of that original trauma comes up in something else, and all of a sudden you experience a pain in your arm. It's like, what's that all about?
Which is very unusual, because this lifetime, and I didn't make the correlation, but I've had an issue with my upper arms now, and I do have a huge scar here. And so I never wanted my upper arms to show until actually this summer, when I had gone through something different. I just said, well, that's it. So we really can have a trauma to the body and have it affect us psychologically. And it was just amazing. Now, I had done a regression with one woman who, and this is a personal friend of mine, who had a lot of hip pain. And she just couldn't take it anymore. So I did a regression with her, and I talked to the hip. And I said, hip, what is going on? What is this pain all about? And she went immediately back to the time that she was in the ballpark. I think it was the Cubs or the Sox park, which is the south side.
That's White Sox.
White Sox. Her uncle had actually been holding her over the ledge, playing with her. Now, that's a very traumatic, frightening thing. and all of that memory got trapped in her hip.
I would think so. That's
And as soon as we walked her
Scary.
through the whole thing, had her become this powerful little girl, you know, telling her uncle off and everything else, she
That's
hasn't
it.
had a problem with her hip since, not since that time,
Sure.
which was
The
just phenomenal.
The psychological pieces keep the memory of the pain there, and when certain things come up, the memory becomes, we relive the memory so strongly that we actually feel it physically.
yeah.
Yes.
And so that pain will totally leave when we've gotten to the root and handled all the psychological pieces
Yes.
that are still
Yeah.
unresolved.
Exactly.
See, she was in a state of consciousness, whereas even if she had leaned over the banister like this, that memory would have come rushing back to her mind.
Yes.
And the key is, and you did the right thing,
Yes.
to speak to her hip,
Yes.
because that was the part that was psychologically damaged now, and it was transmitting a message to her brain.
That's where she keeps the
Yes.
memory.
That's where she keeps the memory
She keeps it
here.
not somewhere in the head.
Yes.
She keeps it in the hip.
But it transmits to the brain that you have a problem here.
Yes.
You see, and so she keeps that problem here.
Yes.
So you have to talk to here.
Yes.
You see.
So we can actually then, with people having the phobias or possibility if something hasn't
Fears.
progressed to deep tissue, if the problems
Yes.
aren't that bad, actually talk to the body and see what's
Yes.
going on, what memories do we have
Yes.
there, you know, the past lives,
I would
the
say,
attachments,
this would be the
everything.
issue. This would be the way to go.
Yeah,
That's
regression.
like when he was mentioning earlier, well, you know, does it take 1 or 2 sessions for a hypnotherapist? Well, you know, we can't say. A person might come in, oh, I have a fear of falling. Oh, usually something like that can be handled. But
Yeah.
when you find out that the fear of falling is because, you know, your father or your entire family was throwing you over a cliff because you're a bad person, whoa, we got 3 or 4 sessions,
Yeah,
we've got to
3 or
handle
4
that.
sessions, right,
Totally,
right.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, my big thing is I wonder what regression we're going to have to do in a couple of years from the bungee jumpers.
You are bad. You are so bad.
These were probably the old people that used to get thrown into the volcanoes, but they're saying, nanny, nanny, doo-doo, I'm coming back up.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Well, I think this has just been wonderful. Regarding regressions, Robert and Michael, do you each have one last word that you'd like to give about why you feel regression therapy is a bonus for people while they're trying to do a healing process?
I'll let Michael go first.
There is nothing more important than getting to the root of a problem, because the problems are issues are resolved when you get to the root of the original event, and regression work will take you back to that event, whether it's in this lifetime, childhood in this lifetime, or in some past lifetime. When you get to the root, then you can deal with that original event and handle all the aspects surrounding it and heal the actual relationships. So when you handle
Perfect.
the relationship, then you find out, oh, it's a slightly different relationship in this life, and that somehow gets cleared up just
Right.
in
Just right away.
And Robert,
I
one
think
quick
that
word, because we're just about out
Yeah,
of time.
I think that the main thing is that regression therapy does get to the root cause, but I also feel that a problem can become a possession.
Yes.
It can possess you mentally.
Yes.
Okay, and it can sometimes translate into the physical, where you say you see this is on my arm, but it's a psychosomatic.
And then it becomes to serve us.
It becomes
a crutch.
It becomes a crutch, and you
Yes.
hang on to the crutch.
Okay.
So that's why regression therapy can play a big role.
I want to thank both of you today for being
Thank you.
here, Robert,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Robert
Always gives us
Crawford,
fun.
Reverend Michael Dyer, and this is River West Flowing, and thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great week, month, year.
Let's
Thank you.
regress Bill.
Here we go, yeah.